Good day, my name is Fourie, and today I will be talking about sensitization to the preservatives Methylchloroisothiazolinone, Methylisothiazolinone mix, and Methylisothiazolinone on its own. The isothiazolinones are a group of preservatives and include methylchloroisothiazolinone, methylisothiazolinone, octan-isothiazolinone, and benzyl-isothiazolinone. These substances are used in various industrial and household water-based products to inhibit the microbial overgrowth and prevent degradation of the product by microorganisms. The MCI-MI combination, also known as Cathon CG or Uxor K100, is frequently used in self-care products. And as early as the 1980s, high rates of sensitization and allergic contact dermatitis from exposure to these substances were reported. And at a later stage, it was thus decided to try and use the MI as a preservative on its own, as initial research had shown that it was 30 times less sensitizing than the MCI. However, its use has resulted in reactions to it increasing to the extent that it was named the allergen of the year in the USA in 2013. So the reactions to these products has resulted in new legislation around the concentration allowed in self-care products. In Europe in 2016, the legislation lowered the maximum allowable concentration of the MCI-MI mix in all range of cosmetic products to 15 parts per million, and in fact prohibited its use in leave-on products such as moisturizers, deodorants, creams, etc. However, the concentration of the MCI-MI mix in industrial or household cleaning products remained unregulated, and there were no labeling requirements in terms of product composition. And it is in fact still used in industrial products such as paints, glues, cutting oils, or fluids, or cooling fluids. In the USA, in an attempt to reduce this sensitization, the concentration of the MCI-MI mix was reduced even further in leave-on products to 7.5 parts per million. Restrictions, however, do not seem to have had an impact on the high prevalence of sensitization in the general population. And this may be due to the application of several cosmetics, which may cause a summation of concentration of these preservatives, or patients with pre-existing dermatitis may be one of the major consumers of self-care products, and having an impaired barrier increases the penetration of the allergens and increases the risk of sensitization. In an occupational setting, exposure to these preservatives is becoming an increasing cause of allergic contact dermatitis. Sensitization to methylisothiazolinone was first shown from exposure to wallpaper glue and paints, and often the reactions to these were severe. In Finland, they showed a 6-fold increase in sensitization to the preservatives amongst hairdressers and beauticians over 2 periods of time, from 2002 to 2008, and then from 2008 to 2013. In England, in a study done from looking at data from 1996 to 2012, it was shown that there was an increase of 4.1% in occupational allergic contact dermatitis from exposure to the preservative per annum. Common exposures include rinse-off products such as detergents, liquid soaps, industrial hand cleaners, etc. So reactions to the MCI-MI mix and or the methylisothiazolinone, as has been shown in many other countries, were commonly seen in patients patch tested at the Occupational Dermatology Clinic at the National Institute for Occupational Health in South Africa. It was therefore decided to analyze the clinic data from the period January 2006 to January 2018 to determine the prevalence of sensitization reaction to these preservatives. The records of 829 referrals to the NIH clinic were retrospectively reviewed. The NIH Dermatology database is used for capturing data of patients routinely referred to the Occupational Skin Clinic. The patients include referrals from companies suspected of having an occupational skin disease. These patients are then examined by a dermatologist, and if occupational allergy is suspected, patch testing is done with relevant allergens as determined from the occupational history and all the safety data sheets which are provided by the companies. Other patients that are also seen at the clinic are referrals from private dermatologists or from dermatology departments at government hospitals, specifically for patch testing. Of the 829 patients seen between January 2006 and January 2018, 590 patients were suspected of possibly having an allergic contact dermatitis, and these were patch tested with the European Standard Series and or the Cosmetic Series, among others. Since these two series especially included the preservatives, the Methylchloroisothiazolinone, Methylisothiazolinone mix, and or the Methylisothiazolinone. Initially, the MI was provided with the Cosmetic Series of allergens, so only patients where self-care products were thought to play a role were tested with the MI. Later on, the MI was added to the European Standard Series and therefore tested on all patients who were tested in the clinic. So 590 patients were tested with the European Standard Series and 100 patients were tested with the Cosmetic Series. So patch testing was performed according to the recommendations of the European Society of Contact Dermatitis, a guideline for diagnostic patch testing. The patches were prepared in-house from commercial patch test series allergens, depending on the likely sensitization anticipated from history and examination. And IQ chambers were used for the testing, and both these were obtained from chemotechnique. Patch tests were applied to the upper back in the IQ chambers and left on the back for 48 hours. Readings were then performed half an hour after removing the patches and then again on day 3. The reactions were read according to the ICDG criteria as laid out in the European Society of Contact Dermatitis guideline. The positive reactions were graded as 1, 2, or 3 plus. The frequency of reactions to MCI, MI, and MI in the European Standard Series and Cosmetic Series were identified. So this gets a little bit confusing because initially the MCI-MI mix was tested at a concentration of 0.01%. And in July 2014, MI was introduced as a single allergen at a concentration of 0.2%. And in September 2015, the MCI-MI concentration was doubled from 0.1% to 0.2%, as it was felt that there were probably false negative results due to the concentration of the allergen being too low. So the tests were done with different concentration of allergens and different allergens over this period of time. The statistics, the data from the clinic consult with the patient was captured in the Dermatology Access database and was then exported into Excel for analysis. Descriptive statistics were applied and percentages were used to determine the difference in sensitization to the MCI-MI mix, the MI, or a combination of the two preservatives over time. The study also reported the change in the concentration of positive reactions due to the effect of change in the MCI-MI mix concentration from 0.01 to 0.02% and an introduction of the MI on its own. The results, patient demographics and the patch test conducted at the NIH Occupational Dermatology Clinic. We had 829 patients that were entered into the database. Of these, 609 were occupational referrals to the clinic, while 220 were non-occupational referrals from dermatologists or from the hospitals. There were equal number of males and females represented at the clinic, and the median age was 42.3, with a range of 10 to 73 years of age. The patch test series, I said earlier, the European Standard series was tested in 590 people, while the cosmetic series was tested in 110 people. If we look at the results of testing with the MCI-MI mix and the MI, it gets a little bit confusing because the allergens were tested, different concentrations and different allergens were tested. However, let's persevere. So if firstly one looks at testing with the MCI-MI mix at either the concentrations that were tested over this period, we see that 5.1% of the patients were actually sensitized to this allergen. However, if we look at the testing with the 0.01% solution, we can see that over this entire period, 4.7% of patients were actually positive to the mix. And one can see that from January 2006 to December 2009, there were actually no positive cases. The reason for this is uncertain, but it might be that these were purely occupational cases and that they were that the mix was not being used in the substances in the workplace at that time. When the concentration of the allergen was doubled, one can see that 6.2% of the patients actually were positive to this agent, compared to the 4.7 in the previous period and the previous concentration. However, when one then started testing both the mix and the MI, one can see that the reactions increased quite dramatically. The MI was positive in 17.9% of the 84 patients that were tested, while 8.3% of the patients were sensitized to or reacted to both the MCI-MI and the MI on its own. And all in all, we can see that 13.2% reacted to either one of the two substances on their own or to both. So we had a positive sensitization in 13.2% of patients in total. So as this is quite confusing, I thought we would just rehash it. So during the period from January 2006 to January 2018, 5.1% of the patients were sensitized to the MCI-MI mix, and this was in fact the fifth most prevalent allergen, following nickel, chromate, cobalt, and fragrances. So it was quite prevalent amongst the people tested. From January 2006 to August 2015, 4.7% of the patients were sensitized to the MCI-MI mix at a 0.1% concentration, whereas from September 2015 to January 2018, 6.2% were sensitized to the mix, and this was tested at 0.02%. So we're seeing a better detection of the reactions to the increased concentration of the mix. And again, of the 84 patients tested with the Methylisothiazolinone, and in fact they have also been tested with the MCI-MI mix, 17.9% of the patients were shown to be sensitized to the MI only, which would mean that if we had tested only with the MCI-MI mix, we would have missed these patients. And 8.3% of the patients were sensitized to both the MI and MCI-MI mix. So all in all, 13.2% of the patients were sensitized to these preservatives, whether it was to the mix or to the MI on its own. So sensitization to these isothiocyanates was detected amongst 18 of the 590 cases of occupational contact dermatitis that were patch tested. So 3.1% of the occupational cases referred to the clinic were tested positive for these allergens, and they were from a wide range of occupations and included fitters, millwright, there were nurses, dental technician, hairdresser, nail technicians, cleaners, and medical interns. So one can see that this allergen can be found, these allergens rather, can be found in a variety of different workplaces. In 12.7% of the non-occupational cases, they were shown to be sensitized to these allergens. These patients usually had reactions often on their faces, or they were generalized reactions all over the body. And when one looked at the self-care products that these patients were using, one could see that they contained these substances. So, in conclusion, the prevalence of sensitization to the MCI-MI mix and MI at the NIOH Occupational Dermatology Clinic was shown to increase over the years. Although the increase may be partly due to more optimized testing, the number of cases of sensitization to the preservatives detected, both in occupational and non-occupational setting, is of great concern. It is important that the concentration of these substances in industrial products, as well as self-care products and home care products, be reduced. This legislation must be introduced and enforced to regulate the use of non-sensitizing level of these preservatives in the industrial setting. And in companies where the concentrated solution of these isothiocyanates are used, it would be ideal that closed systems for handling the preservatives should be introduced. Also, the workers that are involved with these chemicals should receive proper education on the dangers associated with these chemicals, especially in the concentrated state, and the use of appropriate personal protective equipment should be encouraged. From the data, we also demonstrated the importance of adapting the allergens used for testing so that they remain relevant. Since MI is now being used as a preservative on its own, and the fact that the MCI-MI allergen was not able to detect all the cases of patients sensitized to the MI, it was important that the MI was introduced into the European Standard Series and Cosmetic Series for testing. Another important feature is that continual research be undertaken to optimize the patch tests. These preservatives are commonly used, and they are also well-known sensitizers, and if these are not tested at the correct concentration, sensitized patients may be missed during testing. As we saw, testing with the MCI at double the concentration, that is a 0.02% concentration, proved to detect more cases of sensitization to the preservative than the 0.01% allergen. So this is a very important aspect of patch testing.